Good afternoon, I'm Katie Wilson and you are watching A News. Let's see your headlines. Tensions rise over Iran nuclear programme as concerns over IAEA staff safety emerge. President Zelensky says Ukraine is set to withdraw from anti-personnel mines treaty. Thousands of firefighters battle intense wildfires in Türkiye. Tensions continue to escalate over Iran's nuclear programme, with conflicting assessments of recent US strikes and growing concern for the safety of international nuclear inspectors. As international pressure mounts, Iran insists that any future talks must come with security guarantees.
US President Donald Trump reaffirmed his stance, saying Washington is not speaking to Tehran and not offering Iran anything. He again claimed that US forces had totally obliterated Iran's nuclear facilities, a statement at odds with the assessment of UN nuclear chief Rafael Grossi, who said Iran could resume uranium enrichment within months. Grossi stressed that while Iran's nuclear infrastructure suffered severe damage, key capacities remain intact. The IAEA's findings align with early US intelligence, which also suggests the program was set back only temporarily. Amid rising uncertainty, Iran's Deputy Foreign Minister Majid Takhtravanchi told the BBC that the US must rule out further military action if it wants a return to talks. He said Iran is still waiting for clarity, questioning whether negotiations can proceed in the shadow of aggression. The relationship between Iran and the International Atomic Energy Agency has also deteriorated. Iran's parliament recently voted to suspend cooperation with the watchdog, accusing it of bias toward the US and Israel. Adding to concerns, Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson said the security of IAEA inspectors cannot be guaranteed following the strikes. While Trump has said he would absolutely consider further strikes if Iran crosses nuclear thresholds, Iranian officials maintain that uranium enrichment is their inalienable right and will continue for peaceful purposes. With no date set for talks and both sides trading warnings, the path back to diplomacy remains uncertain.
Israel's Prime Minister has praised the Domestic Intelligence Service, saying two major threats to the country's existence have been eliminated. Speaking to members of the Israeli Domestic Intelligence Service, known as Shin Bet, on Sunday, Benjamin Netanyahu described recent operations as a turning point, citing technological advances and successful neutralization of critical threats. He said new opportunities are emerging, with hostage rescue and the defeat of Hamas now his top priorities. Currently, 50 hostages remain in Gaza, 20 of whom are believed to be alive. Now, as tensions escalate in northern Gaza and new diplomatic efforts gain momentum, we look at what could come next. To unpack this, we are joined by political analyst Tom Gross from Tel Aviv. Thank you for being with us, Tom. Now, Israel has ordered new evacuations in northern Gaza, citing the need to target Hamas infrastructure, yet reports of civilian casualties are continuing, even in areas previously designated as safe. How is this being viewed inside Israel, and what are the main strategic objectives here?
Well, it's a tragic situation all round in Gaza for the Palestinian population, and of course also for the Israeli hostages that are still there, many of them alive. But many feel what would be even worse than an immediate ceasefire would be to leave Hamas in power, when, at least according to Israel, they're quite close to having Hamas surrender or remove them from power. Now, Israeli society is very divided. There were big demonstrations over the weekend against the government, calling for an immediate ceasefire and the only priority being hostage releases rather than Hamas surrender. But there are others in Israel that point out that the very same people demonstrating now are the same kind of people, or literally the same people, demonstrating 20 years ago, calling for Israel to withdraw from Gaza. Before then, Israel had occupied Gaza between 1967 and 2005. And they pointed out that you can't just withdraw from Gaza, leave Hamas in place, and hope for the best. Because what you get is an authoritarian dictatorship over the population of Gaza by Hamas, and you get constant wars, small wars, leading up to the bigger war we're now seeing in the last 2 years, in which Hamas attacks Israel. And the only answer is to make sure there's a government in Gaza that represents Palestinians but is not interested in jihad or, attacking or even eliminating the state of Israel.
So you've touched on that domestic pressure there on the government, and of course there's also international pressure. Do you see the government prioritising a ceasefire, or will they continue these military operations?
Well, they're trying to get both, but I think what the government would like is Qatar, which is a kind of backer, financial backer of Hamas and houses the Hamas leadership in Doha, Qatar, for Qatar to seriously pressure Hamas into surrendering or laying down their arms or becoming a normative political party rather than an armed militant or terror group. And the two main backers of Hamas were Iran and Qatar. The government in Iran has obviously been greatly weakened after the recent war against Israel and is in disarray now. And President Trump, who visited Qatar a few weeks ago, could exert a lot more pressure on the government of Qatar to tell Hamas, you are never going to win this war militarily, and therefore, it's better for everyone to find a way out, to issue some kind of surrender, which Hamas doesn't want to do.
So President Trump is also claiming that a ceasefire could be reached soon. How realistic do you think that is? And as you say, both the US and Qatar do have roles to play in those negotiations, don't they?
Yes, look, I think Trump wants a ceasefire as soon as possible because, he wants to be the guy who makes peace agreements, and he triumphs them whenever he can, whether it was India and Pakistan, Iran or Israel. However, domestically, I cannot see the Israeli government giving in and allowing Hamas to rearm and regain until there's a point of a tipping point where Hamas really cannot reconstitute the governing authority. And it will be, Netanyahu will be caught between these two pressures, the pressures of beating Hamas and the pressure of Donald Trump saying ceasefire now. And I should add, Trump also wants to move forward with a wider peace agreement involving Israel and Saudi Arabia and other Arab countries. And it's very hard for Saudi Arabia, that wants to normalize relations with Israel, but can't politically do it while the war in Gaza is still raging. So they want to Trump wants a ceasefire in order to then also move forward with Israeli-Saudi normalization.
Thank you very much for your insights, Tom, and for joining us on the programme.
Thank you.
Now, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has signed a decree for the country's withdrawal from the Ottawa Convention, which bans the use of anti-personnel landmines. This move comes in response to Russia's non-compliance with the treaty and Ukraine's need to defend itself amid ongoing conflict.
Ukraine is set to withdraw from the Ottawa Convention after President Volodymyr Zelensky signed a decree on Sunday. The convention bans the production and use of anti-personnel landmines. The decree was published on the official presidential website. In a video address to the nation, Zelensky explained that Russia has ignored the convention's obligations during the ongoing war with Ukraine.
Russia was never part of this convention, and it is using anti-personnel mines with utmost cynicism. And not only now, by the way, in its war against Ukraine. It's a hallmark of Russian killers. To destroy life by all means at their disposal, with chemical weapons and ballistic missiles, including medium-range ones. Also in the mix are all kinds of mines, including anti-personnel ones. Unfortunately, this is how it is. We see how our neighbours in Europe react to this threat.
Notably, Russia has intensified its offensive operations in recent months, gaining a significant advantage in manpower. The date for parliamentary discussion of the issue has yet to be announced.
Well, a significant number of NATO and EU countries are pulling out of the Ottawa Convention. That's the international treaty banning anti-personnel landmines. Lithuania, Poland, Finland, Estonia, Latvia and Ukraine have all announced or initiated withdrawal procedures. This move comes amid heightened security concerns from Russia and signals a shift in regional defence strategies.
The wave of withdrawals began in April and has accelerated in recent weeks. On April 16, 2025, Latvia's parliament voted in favour of exiting the treaty, citing national defence needs. Finland followed on June 19th, with parliament approving withdrawal legislation, emphasising the country's 1,340-kilometre border with Russia. On June 25th, Poland's lower house, the Sejm, passed a resolution to leave the convention, arguing that the ban restricts legitimate defence capabilities. Estonia finalised its parliamentary vote on June 4th and officially notified the UN later in June, aligning with its Baltic neighbours. Lithuania formally submitted its withdrawal notice to the United Nations on June 27th, triggering the treaty's 6-month exit clause. And on June 29th, Ukraine joined the wave. President Volodymyr Zelensky signed a decree initiating withdrawal, declaring that anti-personnel mines are now vital for protecting Ukrainian territory amid Russia's invasion. The Ottawa Convention, or Anti-Personnel Mine Ban Treaty, was adopted in 1997 and entered into force in 1999. It bans the use, production, transfer, and stockpiling of anti-personnel landmines and requires the destruction of existing stockpiles. The treaty currently has 165 state parties, but several major military powers, including Russia, China, India, Pakistan, and the United States, have never joined. The recent withdrawals signal a critical shift in the future of the Ottawa Convention. As these countries adapt their defense strategies in response to increasing security threats, the effectiveness of the treaty in addressing modern military challenges is now in question. With several NATO and EU members reconsidering their commitment, the Convention faces growing pressure to evolve in line with current geopolitical realities.
In southern France, farmers and environmentalists in Les Prix-en-Vallée protested against the proposed Duplom law, warning against reintroducing banned pesticides such as neonicotinoids. The bill has sparked nationwide demonstrations against reauthorising harmful pesticides that threaten pollinators and biodiversity, raising concerns over risks to both nature and public health. Environmental groups and unions warned the move could have irreversible consequences. A joint Senate National Assembly committee will review the legislation on Monday. In Spain's city of Seville, activists braved extreme heat on Sunday to demand debt relief, climate action and fairer taxation, just a day before a major United Nations summit on development financing. The 4-day event, held once a decade, faces criticism for lacking ambition, especially following the withdrawal of the United States.
Marching through the scorching streets of Seville, demonstrators called for urgent change. Cancel crushing international debts, tax the ultra-wealthy, hold big polluters accountable, and ensure climate and economic justice are at the centre of global policy. But expectations are low. Critics point to reduced foreign aid from wealthy nations and the absence of the United States. Greenpeace activists carried a striking float showing billionaire Elon Musk as a chainsaw-wielding baby, while others held banners reading "Make polluters pay" and "Tax justice now."
We are seeking for a fairer system. We are seeking for a fairer tax system. We are also seeking for cancellation of debt. And then we want dignity, not handouts.
We are calling all nations. We are calling United Nations systems. We are calling CSO. We are calling public and private sector to make this FFD for concrete action. To think about community, to think about developing countries, to be less selfish, to be more, to show more solidarity.
Earlier in the day, Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez expressed cautious optimism, saying the very act of holding the summit amid global turmoil is, in itself, a sign of hope. The four-day summit officially begins on Monday.
A top United Nations official has issued a warning that 1 in 4 people globally now live in conflict zones. Speaking in Beijing, Jorge Moreira da Silva, the UN's Under-Secretary General and head of UNOPS, called for a renewed global commitment to peace amid deepening humanitarian crises in the Middle East and beyond.
In a world plagued by crises and escalating conflicts, 1 in every 4 people now lives in a conflict zone. That stark warning came from a top United Nations official speaking exclusively in Beijing. The UN's Jorge Moreira da Silva echoed calls for de-escalation in the Middle East, warning that rising tensions threaten both regional stability and humanitarian efforts. And the human toll continues to grow. More than 105 million people are forcibly displaced worldwide, with 35 million now classified as refugees.
It's very impressive to see the numbers. In the 21st century, in 2025, today we have more than 105 million people that are forcibly displaced, 35 million refugees. And the numbers are not improving. They are just getting worse and worse because the crises are being compounded.
As conflicts compound and diplomacy falters, Da Silva says it's time to revisit the very foundation of the UN.
Today we have 1/4 of the population in the world that live under conflict, that they don't have the most essential thing that we can afford or wish in life, which is peace. And it's the time to raise the bar and recommitting on peace, which is the fundamental element of the United Nations Charter.
With tensions simmering and displacement rising, the call is clear. The world must act now to prioritise peace before more lives are uprooted.
Türkiye is once again battling raging wildfires with strong winds spreading flames across Izmir and nearby provinces. Thousands of firefighters have been deployed, evacuations of people from their homes are underway, and investigations are ongoing as officials confirm at least 9 major fires.
Turkey is once again battling devastating wildfires as temperatures soar across the country. In the western province of Izmir, strong winds have fueled multiple blazes, forcing evacuations and suspending airport operations.
The fire has just reached the houses below. I do not know how it will continue there. The fire, which began in Izmir's Menderes district, rapidly spread to nearby Gazimir and Seferihisar. Residents watched in fear as flames advanced into residential areas. There are lots of houses there. There is a summer camp. The forest goes all the way there. I thought it will not cross the road, but it did. The wind is extremely strong.
Heavy gusts, reaching up to 100 kilometers per hour, have severely hampered aerial firefighting efforts.
Because of the heavy wind and dry weather, the fire quickly moved towards the Menderes district due to the direction of the wind, and it is not under control. Our teams are working on the ground. The wind gusts are between 70 to 100 kilometers per hour, so our air units are not operating.
The Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry says more than 1,000 firefighters, 11 planes and 27 helicopters are battling the flames. Minister Ibrahim Yumakli confirmed that 3 people were treated for smoke inhalation and later released. So far, 4 villages and 2 neighbourhoods have been evacuated in Izmir. Nationwide, a total of 9 major fires have broken out across Izmir, Denizli, Manisa and Aydın. Minister Yumakli says 3 of the fires in Izmir remain serious and response efforts will continue. Meanwhile, Justice Minister Yilmaz Tunç announced that 17 individuals have been detained as part of an ongoing investigation into the cause of the fires. Prosecutors are conducting what Tunç described as comprehensive and meticulous inquiries.
During a working visit to Italy, Azerbaijan's Minister of Agriculture, Murad Moradov, met with the Food and Agriculture Organization Director General Ku Dong-yu at their headquarters in Rome to discuss ongoing and future cooperation. Moradov highlighted the significance of hosting COP29 in Azerbaijan, addressing measures to minimize the impact of climate change on agriculture. He underscored that agricultural development is a priority in Azerbaijan. Ku Dong-yu hailed the high-level relations between Azerbaijan and the FAO, noting that Azerbaijan is a key partner. The parties exchanged ideas on projects implemented under the FAO-Azerbaijan Partnership Programme and their outcomes. Azerbaijan is demanding accountability after 2 of its citizens were killed and several others were injured in what it calls a violent and unjustified raid by Russian security forces in Ekaterinburg. The operation targeted Azerbaijani households and has sparked outrage in Baku over the treatment of its nationals.
Azerbaijan has strongly condemned what it calls a brutal and unjustified operation by Russian security forces in the city of Yekaterinburg. During the raid on Friday, 2 Azerbaijani nationals were killed, several others injured, and at least 9 were detained. The deadly operation, led by the Russian Federal Security Service, targeted over 10 homes belonging to Azerbaijani families, raising serious concerns about ethnic profiling and the use of excessive force. The victims, Ziadin and Hussein Safarov, were from a well-known Azerbaijani family, originally from Agdam. Their brother, Shakir, confirmed their deaths and is arranging to repatriate their bodies. Several other family members and compatriots remain in custody, with reports suggesting over 60 Azerbaijanis may have been detained. One of those detained and later released described being beaten and humiliated by security forces who allegedly entered without warrants and confiscated valuables, including money and gold. He also claimed that both he and his father were assaulted during the raid. Azerbaijan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs summoned Russia's chargé d'affaires in Baku and issued a strong protest, demanding an immediate and transparent investigation. Officials accused Russian law enforcement of acting with disregard for legal standards and called the killings unacceptable. While the Russian Foreign Ministry claims the raids were part of an ongoing investigation into serious past crimes, allegedly involving Russian citizens of Azerbaijani origin, it has offered little clarity on the deaths or the violence used during the operation. Azerbaijan has called on Moscow to hold those responsible accountable and to guarantee the safety and legal rights of Azerbaijani citizens living in Russia.
One of the Azerbaijanis detained in Ekaterinburg on Friday and later released has shared harrowing details of alleged abuse at the hands of Russia's Federal Security Service. Fugar Safarov describes violent beatings and says his father was brutally tortured despite having serious health issues. Here's Safarov speaking to Azerbaijan's Report news agency about the incident.
At first I didn't open the door, but when I saw they were breaking it down, I opened it myself. Everyone was wearing masks. They were from Russia's Federal Security Service. There were also 2 children at home. They beat us without asking anything. They slammed our heads on the floor. They hit us with chairs. They laid us down in dirty cars and said, "Eat this mud." In detention, they tortured us with electric shocks. They insulted us, hit our heads and said, "Do you like it?" They shouted, "Why did you come here?" I could hear my father screaming in the next room. He told them he had a stent in his heart, but they tortured that area with electric current. He screamed, "I'm dying," and only then they called an ambulance. He told me, "Son, they want to blame everything on me. All my ribs are broken." I saw his face. There wasn't a single spot left uninjured. They said I had to sign a contract and go to war. I told them I had donated 30,000 rubles for humanitarian aid. They said, "Why so little?" and beat me again. My father asked, "If I agree, will you release my son?" They said yes. That evening, Shahin Shiklinsky and his lawyer son came and got me and my brother out.
Well, to unpack this developing story, we are joined by Murad Moradov, Deputy Director at the Chobchubashov Centre. Thank you for being with us. Now, based on what we know so far, in your view, does this appear to be an isolated incident or part of a broader campaign?
Well, given what's been going on between Russia and Azerbaijan,
We appear to have lost our guest there, so let's continue with the top stories for today. Now, French President Emmanuel Macron held a phone call with Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan, during which he expressed support for Armenia's democratic path. Macron praised efforts to normalise ties with Turkey and achieve peace with Azerbaijan, calling border openings a major step for regional stability. Pashinyan, in turn, thanked Macron for his personal role in strengthening Armenia-France relations. Now we appear to have got Murad, so we're going to return to that story there about Ekaterinburg. Now, Murad, just a reminder of that question. Based on what we know so far, in your view, does this appear to be an isolated incident or part of a broader campaign?
Given what's been going on between Russia and Azerbaijan in the last few months, I think Azerbaijan has significant suspicions that the form in which this raid has been conducted, and again, the attempt to arrest a few dozen people on very dubious charges, is a provocation aimed at intimidating the whole Azerbaijani community and sending them a signal that Russian government may interfere in their business affairs, their private affairs, and also thus send a signal to Baku that Moscow may try to use, to leverage, let's say, the presence of big Azerbaijani diaspora in Russia against Azerbaijan. I would say the fact, for example, that the arrests were related to the crime which happened in 2001, at the time, for example, when some of the detainees who are now in their 20s have been barely born, means that it was a very badly concealed attempt to politicize the relationship with this diaspora.
How serious of a test does this represent for Azerbaijani-Russian relations? How serious of a test does this present for Russia-Azerbaijan relations, given that they have already been strained since the aircraft crash in December last year?
In my opinion, I know the rhetoric which we have witnessed in the last couple of days in the Azerbaijani media is quite unprecedented, to be honest. Again, the accusations of systematic ethnic discrimination and ethnic hatred campaign going on in Russia is not what you would usually hear in the Azerbaijani media. Although, yeah, of course, since the war in Ukraine started, it was clear that Russia is going in this direction, and related to the war in Karabakh, our leadership have on a number of occasions have expressed their concern with, let's say, Russian behavior, the fact that weapon deliveries to Armenia have been going on, and etc., etc. But I think the degree of tension now is getting really strong, and also the tone which has been chosen, I think, indicates that there was a systemic crisis in the mutual relations, and I believe that ultimately what's been worrying Russia is that Azerbaijan has become more independent, and Moscow cannot use, let's say, the Karabakh conflict as a leverage as it used to for, say, the last 30 years against Baku. And also, if we witness what's going on in Armenia, like the Armenian-Turkish approachment, the recent Pashinyan's visit to Turkey, I think it's all indicates that Moscow is deeply worried that the two countries in the South Caucasus are finally on the track towards a peace treaty, which will mean a very profound change in the region. And also the recent, let's say, activization of Azerbaijan's relations with Central Asian countries, especially Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan. It also, I think, worries Moscow that the Central Asia may be next, as they fear. And probably they try to.
Thank you very much for your insights and for joining us on the program. Now, the US and Turkey could resolve key disputes over the F-35 fighter jet program and sanctions by the end of 2025, according to US Ambassador Tom Barrack. Barrack said both sides are ready for a new beginning, with support from Congress and top leaders. Turkey was removed from the F-35 program in 2019 after purchasing Russian S-400 systems, triggering US sanctions. But Barrack says momentum is building for a breakthrough, possibly resetting the broader US-Turkey agenda after years of tension. That's all we have for now. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to A News.